live. This is Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to Law Call. I'm Ted Howell with the law firm of Perry & Young, and we're here tonight to answer your questions live on the air about income taxation. Taxes and the law. You can give us a call at 850-392-1544, or you can email us at lawcall@wnbb.com. And to assist me in going through these numerous topics tonight is the prestigious Mindy Rankin, who I've known, I think, for the better part of my life.
Hey Ted, thanks for having me tonight.
Yes, ma'am. If you would introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Mindy Rankin. I am from Marianna, Florida originally. Yep. Ted and I go way back.
Yes, we do.
I graduated from Troy University, so go Trojans.
There you go.
And I work at Warren Averett, and I specialize in tax, so I'm here to help.
Very good, very good. And I think we already have an opening email question that we'll go ahead and do to kick everything off. This is from Wendy. I received a large settlement earlier this year from a car wreck. Will I have to pay federal or state income taxes on that amount? And that is from Wendy. Mindy, this is probably one of the most frequent questions I get through the course of a case, and it's a very important one. We've got this settlement now, and what does that mean from an income tax standpoint?
Well, the good news is that if it was due to physical injury or physical sickness, then it's actually excluded from income. Big thing though, make sure that you keep your paperwork. Right. So the paperwork from your settlement, everything that relates to how the allocation was made, it is excludable from income as long as it was due to physical injury.
Part of any settlement that you should get is not only the release showing that you've signed and resolved the case, or a settlement agreement, but also a disbursement statement that shows exactly how much you settled the case for, what the attorney's fees were, what you paid back in medical expenses or liens, and then what you netted at the end of the day. And it's important to keep all of that together with your important papers just in case you are ever audited or anyone asks you any questions. I know, Mindy, there's been things floated around recently about maybe having more federal oversight of when you're depositing money into the banks. Right now, if you were to take more than $10,000 to the bank, or $10,000 in any transaction, that's a reportable event. And I remember a few years ago they were talking about even changing that to check transactions. So who knows if that's going to happen in the future. So make sure and keep that documentation. Your lawyer should also always have it if, God forbid, you lose it. So just make sure and keep that information so that you can explain that and answer that if that ever comes up.
Speaking of paperwork,
yes,
you always want to keep your tax documents for at least 7 years.
Absolutely.
So that's always a question that we get when people call the office. They say, how long do I need to keep all this stuff? A good rule of thumb is 7 years.
Right. And I know if God forbid, if you've lost them, you can request them directly from the IRS, because I know that's something that happens frequently with us when we get into lawsuits. Individuals have moved, they've lost the paperwork, and you can, but I believe they charge you about $25 a year to get those. So it's best if you can just keep them or go to your accountant and then get a copy from them. I know if I needed one, Mindy would be able to get me copies of mine right away. So it's just important to keep that kind of stuff. And in today's age, you can keep them digitally as well as in hard form. So just make sure and keep that with all of your important paperwork so that you have it when the time arises. I know, Mindy, in our area, one of the situations that comes up quite frequently, unfortunately, is natural disasters and how that interplays with the tax code. If you have a scenario like that where you've had a loss and maybe you did not have insurance for whatever reason, how does that play into your tax situation?
There is a big law that actually just got signed. Representative Stubbe from South Florida, because Hurricane Ian really affected his area, they actually just passed a law. President Biden hasn't signed it yet, but Senate and House passed it, and it qualifies the hurricanes. Wow. So that is a big advantage for people that were severely affected, and it goes all the way back to December of 2020. So any hurricane since then, a qualified disaster helps you because you don't have to itemize to be able to take your loss. You can just add it to your standard deduction. So most people take the standard deduction, and now if you had a casualty loss due to a hurricane, you can just add it to
on
your
top of your standard
on
without
top
having
of your
to totally switch to itemization.
right. And it also removes the 10% of adjusted gross income limitation that affects a lot of people too. So this was a huge win for people that have had hurricanes in the last few years.
But that requires a special act of Congress. That is not an automatic qualifier for any and all hurricanes.
That's correct. The designation is called a qualified disaster. It's a big deal, and we actually got it for Hurricane Michael. I don't know if y'all remember, but it was late. It came like almost after tax filing season was over, so it was a little bit of a hassle to get your return fixed. But anyway, it is a big news for everybody,
Right.
especially the victims of Hurricane Ian, the ones we just had with Idalia, like all the ones that were more recent. It's going to be very helpful for people to get help.
Very good. But now that, for example, if I just have a normal fire loss at my house and I have a portion of that claim that is uninsured, that is not something I can just write off my taxes,
It is
correct?
not. With the passage of the 2018 TJCAA, they actually said you could only take a casualty loss. It was a presidentially declared disaster. So that's a big deal. So when the governor actually declares a disaster for your state and Biden agrees, that's considered a presidentially declared disaster. So really, to be able to take a loss, you have to have that presidential declaration.
Okay. Okay. So anything outside of that, make sure you are taking other steps, but do not write it off of your taxes. And as always, just like in my field, in the legal field, trying to attack any of these problems is pretty difficult to do on your own. I assume you need a good accountant to help you with most any of these issues.
Yes. I think the form for the casualty loss, the actual instructions say that it takes 17 hours to prepare the form if you're doing it yourself. So make sure that you see your local help for sure.
Okay. Now, Mindy, in addition to taxes, does your business actually do some sort of audits, or do they have a division that deals with those types of scenarios as well?
Yeah, in our tax department, we do represent people under audit. You know, if the IRS, if you get a letter or something, a lot of times they're a desk audit. So if you claim charitable contributions or something like that, and the IRS sends you a letter and says we want proof, yeah, the CPA firm, whoever prepares your taxes, will represent you in front of the IRS. It should be pretty straightforward usually. We help clients a lot with that to resolve things.
Very good, very good. Well, I know another issue that has been discussed is now we have a new administration coming in, and there's always the talk of what does that mean and the implications for the tax code. Is there any rumblings on any changes on the horizon, or does it look like we're going to stay pretty consistent with what we have in the past?
So the original Trump tax laws that were passed in 2018, they are set to expire actually in 2025. So unless Congress takes action, which the rumblings in Washington, D.C. is that Congress is going to take action, there's a lot of stuff that's set to expire and that it will happen automatically. So if Congress doesn't renew some of these breaks that we got in 2018, then they're just going to go away. So there's going to be a huge debate in Congress and in DC over the next few months so that they can get all this settled, because some of the things, you know, the tax rates were lowered in 2018. So automatically, if they don't do something, everybody's tax rates are going to go up. They also have a special standard deduction that's going to be lowered. There's a huge small business. It's called the qualified business income. That's huge for small businesses. That is set to expire. So there is a lot of action that needs to happen in Washington the next few months, really, to
That
get
has
it
to happen
all.
before the end of the year?
Well, it's set to expire at the end of 2025, but to do tax planning, you need to know what the laws are going to be for the next year. So a lot of us accountants are always working in the past, though, because we're, you know, still working on 2023 returns because of hurricanes. There's an extension to May 1st.
Right.
So if you haven't filed your 2023 tax return, you still have time. There is a relief until May 1st.
Is that part of the same process that gives you the ability to write the deduction, or is that two separate processes?
Separate, because Bay County was originally in the cone. I don't know if y'all remember, but some of the hurricanes we've had this year, Debbie, Bay County kind of was in the cone originally.
Right.
So we were in the declaration of the disaster by DeSantis. And so that gave us special hurricane relief. So you actually have until May 1st to file your 2023 tax return. Now you still have to pay, because you were supposed to pay on April 15th, and that was before the hurricanes hit, but you can still file your paperwork. So if you haven't filed your 2023 return yet, you still have time.
get that in, and if you need to pay, make sure you pay sooner rather than later, because I assume if you don't pay on time, there's penalties and interest that go on top of that.
Everything is due on April 15th, even if you file an extension. So if you haven't paid and you think you still owe, you need to try to send in a little bit. Just send in every little bit that you can, because it'll reduce your penalties and interest.
Very good. Now, we have our phone lines open, 850-392-1544, or if you don't want to get on the air live with us, you can email us at lawcall@WMBB.com. I think we might have another email question, if you can get that up for me. Oh, well, let's go to the call first. We have a caller. Who do we have on the air? Eddie. Eddie, proceed with your question, please, Eddie.
Yes.
Eddie, are you there?
Yes.
Eddie, go ahead with your question, please.
My wife's been in a nursing home.
Lost Eddie there. Mindy, is there any special tax situations dealing with nursing homes that you could possibly think of what Eddie was trying to ask us there? Okay, what Eddie is asking is if he can write off the cost of nursing care with respect to his wife.
Yeah, so nursing home care is considered a medical deduction, and you do have to be able to itemize, but in a lot of cases, because of the nursing home expense, there's enough that you can itemize those deductions, and those are a deductible medical cost. So he definitely would want to keep track of that and claim it on Schedule A of his tax return.
Is there a cap on that?
There is not a cap. Now, it is subject to 7.5% of your adjusted gross income, but because of the amount of medical expenses that are involved in a nursing home situation, there's a very good chance that it would help him on his taxes.
Okay, so Eddie, make sure and keep all that paperwork and get that together. Sorry you're having to deal with that, but at least you can try to get something written off of your taxes for that. And I assume when you say medical, is that all medical expenses, or is that unique to nursing care?
No, medical expenses are deductible. The trick, though, is that it is subject to 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. So just for ease, just say you made $100,000, you would have to have medical expenses above $7,500. So it is tough to sometimes be able to write off your medical expenses, but if you have some kind of big expense or some kind of tragedy or something like that, and then of course the cost of nursing home care is so high, you could definitely probably qualify.
Now, once you meet that threshold, for example, in your example, $7,500, do you get to write off the whole $7,500, or is it everything over $7,500?
Everything over.
I gotcha. Okay.
There's always a trick in tax law, so.
Okay, and then there's several things like that. I mean, what about your, I know your mortgage expense. A lot of times you can write that off. Is there a limitation on that as well?
There is a limitation. Actually, part of the TJCAA is that it's capped at $750,000. So if your mortgage is over $750,000, then you have to actually do a calculation that limits it. But most people can claim their mortgage interest. You should get a Form 1098 at the end of every year. Mm-hmm. It comes in the mail, so just be on the lookout for it. And if you're able to itemize, then it is a great benefit to be able to write off your mortgage interest. And we got that email, Ted, about your principal residence. So we get a lot of calls when people are actually selling their home, and so that's actually one of the good things about the tax code. There's kind of a loophole in there where if you lived in your house 2 out of the previous 5 years, you don't have to pay tax on your gain up to $500,000 if you're married filing joint. So it's a very nice benefit. It's called Code Section 121. It's pretty popular. A lot of people use it because then a lot of people will live in their house for 2 years and then sell it, make a little profit, and then roll that into their next house, live in it for 2 years. So it is a good way to upgrade your house if you're looking for, to sell your home.
But now what if you were to say use your home part-time as an Airbnb or some other rental income? Does that jeopardize that ability to use that section?
Yes, it can. Yeah. You have to live in it 2 out of the previous 5 years. So you have to be careful if you live in your house and then you turn it into a rental. You want to make sure that you're calculating it from the time you moved out to when you sell it, and make sure you're within that time frame.
Very good. And I know, there's been some talk, that just made me think about this with debt forgiveness. And I know that happens, and we had a lot of that with the real estate collapse several years ago. if you have a debt forgiveness and you get, I think, is it a 1099-C, is it what I think you typically get when you have one of those, how does that get treated on your taxes?
That is very tricky. You have to know what your basis in your house is. There's some tax attributes that you can adjust to not pick up any kind of income, but you have to be careful on that because it does come, there is a 1099-C for cancellation of debt, and it can be a pretty substantial amount of money if, if something bad happened and you weren't able to pay your bills. But it is very complicated.
Right, but that is something that has to be dealt with and addressed on your taxes. So if you get one of those, please make sure and reach out to someone like Mindy to get that properly addressed so that you know, and the last thing you want to do is have another penalty and interest tacked on top of it because you failed to deal with something that has been reported to the federal government. Another thing that we see frequently is some of the tax liens that get filed in the public records. What do those mean and how do you deal with those?
Are we on?
Yeah.
If you get a tax lien, then you would definitely want to go see an accountant because those are difficult to get removed from your system. But it generally means that you have a debt that needs to get paid, and those liens will go against property and things like that. So if you sell a piece of property, then they can actually take the money. So if you have a tax lien, you definitely want to get some help to try to get that removed.
Very good. Well, we're going to take our first break. Remember, those phone lines are open, 850-392-1544. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Ted Howell with the law firm of Perry & Young here tonight with Mindy Rankin to take your questions about taxes. Those phone lines are open, 850-392-1544. You can email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. Mindy, before the show, you had sent me an article that was detailing and going through some issues on, I believe, some legislation that had required some reporting of beneficial ownership interests. And if you would, just describe briefly what that new requirement was and what the status is of that obligation.
Okay, yeah, FinCEN, it's actually not the IRS, it's the FinCEN department. They are requiring all small business owners that have registered an LLC with the state of Florida and SunBiz to file some ownership information. So this affects everyone, a lot of small businesses. And even if you have a single member LLC where you don't file a separate tax return, but maybe you own rental property or something like that in your LLC, you have to actually go onto the FinCEN website and put who the owners are. Now, what's interesting about this is there was a Texas court case that just very recently was basically putting a temporary injunction on this filing requirement. Now, everyone is supposed to do this before 1/1 of 2025. So all of a sudden, this is just stopped. So people that have already done it, you know, they're like, wait, what? Should we have not done it? So we've been getting a lot of calls about this. It's very interesting. FinCEN is appealing the decision. So right now, the AICPA is actually recommending that you go ahead and file because they don't think the injunction is going to be taken away before the deadline of 1/1/2025. And if you don't file this report, there is substantial penalties. So make sure that you're looking on the FinCEN website and you understand it was part of the Corporate Transparency Act. It really doesn't have anything to do with taxes, but it does affect a lot of our small business clients. And in Bay County, we have tons of small business, so you need to make sure you're aware of those requirements.
Now, does that require you to divulge the ownership interest or just who the actual owners are?
You actually have to put in your driver's license number. So it's quite a bit of an overreach, and that's why some of the courts have already. There's also court cases pending in other jurisdictions, but this Texas court actually put the injunction in place. But you do have to have your driver's license. You have to put in your name, your address, but they're doing it as part of the Corporate Transparency Act to try to combat terrorism. So that's why it was actually put in place. But it does require you to divulge quite a bit of information about your small business.
Because, for example, you know, you mentioned SunBiz, and we have that here in Florida that allows quite a bit of information to be available publicly, pretty readily and pretty easily accessible. If you ever are interested, just go to www.sunbiz.org and you can do a lot of research on companies. When you start looking around the country, you'll notice that most states do not have that level of openness. I mean, as we say, we're the Sunshine State. We have a lot of public records laws that are pretty unique. So I'm sure that that's part of that, is making sure that we have all that information available to us. We have a call on the line now. Who do we have? Ben, go ahead with your question.
Yes, the lady said that you were required to keep your tax record 7 years. According to what I've read in the tax booklet, it says 3 years from the date the tax was due. What's the difference?
I think Ben's question is he believes that there's a provision that suggests only 3 years. I know you were saying that's a recommendation and good practice.
So the statute of limitations runs out in 3 years from the time you filed, but if there's any kind of overstatement of income that's more than 25%, they can actually go back 7 years. So we generally just recommend 7 years. I think it's best practice to do that. Now the statute of limitations runs out in 3 years, so that's important, but it's also kind of tricky because it's from the date filed, and if you didn't file on the 15th, then you might have had an extension. So I just think the best practice is for you to keep your stuff 7 years.
And there's a lot of reasons you may need your taxes other than for just dealing with the IRS. For example, if you were to get into an injury accident and you're now out of work, one of the issues will be substantiating your lost wages. And one way you do that is your history of what you've earned in the past. So we need them quite frequently in our cases. So it's important for a myriad of reasons that you should keep them, though. We do have another call on the line now, if you would. Who do we have now? Jerry from Dothan. Jerry, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I filled out my taxes and for 2023, and I made a mistake on the box where it says, can someone claim you and your wife, and I put yes instead of no. And I put down, the regular $30,000 standard deduction on our form, and we got a statement back from the tax people saying that we owed like $850. We went into the IRS here in town and had them fill out an amended return showing that I had made a mistake, and they sent it in. And a couple of months later, I got another statement back saying we owed $900 and some. And we went back into the IRS department here in Dothan, and the woman filled the whole thing out again. She said, you won't have any problem on this. And she sent it in. And now we got, a couple of days ago, we got another letter from the IRS saying that we owed $980. So what should we do?
Jerry, that's a difficult situation. You're in there with what sounds like just a little scrivener's error that you made on your form inadvertently. Mindy, I mean, that sounds like one of those kind of audit type situations that he's dealing with, possibly.
Yeah, normally on something like that, it probably crossed in the mail. You know, they take, for amended returns, it can take up to 12 weeks to even for them to process it.
Wow.
And the IRS is very behind. So, I mean, they're a huge, entity. So they are many, many weeks behind. So I'm guessing that letter probably crossed in the mail with your paper filed amended return. Now you can e-file an amended return now, and so that might help, Jerry. So if you have a possibility, I mean, I would probably just wait it out because I feel like it's going to take care of itself once the IRS actually processes it. But you could go somewhere and get someone to e-file an amended return for you so that you could go ahead and get that on the record. And when you e-file, you actually have an acceptance with a date and a time, so you know the IRS got it. Now, if you can't get the situation, there is a thing called the Taxpayer Advocate. So you can go to their website, and it's a governmental entity that's actually separate from the IRS, but they take on cases where they actually can help you. So if you have an issue like that where you keep getting letters and you know you're right and you just cannot get it sorted, you can call Taxpayer Advocate and you can start a case, and they're very helpful.
Very good. Well, we're going to go to our last break. Give us a call when we come back. All right, Mindy, we've made it to the end of the show. This is our favorite part. We do our shout outs and giving recognition. You have anybody watching tonight that you'd like to give a little hello to?
Yeah, I'd like to say hello to my parents there in Mexico Beach, and then all my pickleball friends. I was on the courts today. We had a fun afternoon. It was beautiful weather, and they're all supposed to be watching. So. Okay,
well, let's hope they stayed up late. I'm going to give a couple shout outs here. Miss Pam Myers, I got to see her last night. That was wonderful. We also wanted to give a shout out to Gary Starr, the infamous G Money. Got to see him as well. And then my parents, my mom's watching in Jackson County tonight. I believe my dad is watching in Mexico Beach. My wife Heather and kids Judson and Vivian. So y'all should be in bed hopefully. But we will be back next week with another show. So make sure and give us a call. You can email us or we will be here with whatever you need. Just give us a call and we'll get it taken care of. Good night and sleep tight.